In today's episode of Age of Visionaries, we talk to Bob. We speak about how AI can be implemented in HR organizations in a very ethical manner and also in a very responsible manner. Stay tuned. Welcome to Age of Visionaries, the show where we discover the truth behind contemporary HR. I'm your host, Benjamin. Join me as I unfold today's talent ecosystem with HR innovators from around the globe. Welcome to the latest episode of Age of Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today. Bob, it's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. Looking forward to it as well.
Bob, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Sure. My name is Bob Pulver, and I am based in the States, as you probably gathered. I'm just about maybe 30 minutes north of New York City on the East Coast. I spent most of my career in large enterprise doing all kinds of things related to organizational transformation across people, process, technology, data. Most of that time was at IBM, and then a few years at NBC Universal in the CIO's office. So I was always around driving change, driving innovation. I was always a proponent of innovation and ideas. Because they can come from anywhere and we need to be receptive to those. And more recently, in the last few years, I pivoted away from large enterprise, at least working within a large enterprise. And I focused sort of at the, still transformation, but at the intersection of transformation and talent and HR. So that is not to necessarily play a role in HR, but really understand how to drive, lasting transformation. And these days, the focus is on AI-powered transformation. How do we stay human-centric in the age of AI? And how do we establish responsible AI practices, being responsible by design, all the way through responsible use? And so a lot of my work these days is around advocating for AI literacy and AI readiness. And so that's what I talk about on my podcast and through some of my advisory work and other sort of research engagements and things like that.
So to summarize, it was incredibly boring over the last few years.
Far from boring. Yes, it's been kind of crazy to see how fast things are moving, and but I am getting concerned that people are not able to keep up. First, I was concerned that legislation wasn't keeping up with innovation, and now I'm concerned that workers and organizations are not adequately preparing everyone for what's coming. So I'm sure we'll get into that in more detail.
Indeed, and therefore I was wondering, how do you keep up with all the developments, with everything that happens?
I will tell you, admittedly, that I need a better system. But right now, I'm a member of quite a few communities across different disciplines. And so part of it is literally crowdsourcing information. What are people seeing? What is driving, interest and curiosity? What is driving concern? So it might be in the talent acquisition space, and this current sort of battle between the AI that candidates are using versus the AI that hiring teams and talent acquisition teams are using. Because I think when it comes to responsible AI, we need to think about all of those things, and we all need to be responsible. So part of it is sort of community awareness and seeing, gathering information through, Slack channels and other community platforms. Some of it is through newsletters and podcasts, and some of it is just reading, doing research, understanding who are some prominent voices. And then also I talk to a lot of people who are doing master classes and boot camps and educational sessions, everything from in the education sector to talent and HR to other just sort of broader sort of industry lenses to say these are some things that we see disrupting our industry. These are some use cases that we're exploring, and a lot of it is trying to figure out, are people using it the way in a productive, ethical way, versus is someone just, trying to, sort of benefit from this sort of gold rush, if you will, of activity and investment that's going into the space, and they're just basically trying to whip up another shiny object that's not really solving a true business problem, but they see, dollar signs. I know that's a U.S. thing. They see the opportunity in the short term, and they want to take advantage of it. And on some level, I don't necessarily blame them, but at the same time, that can, depending on what you're doing, that could just perpetuate, bias and misunderstanding and skepticism about the potential of AI.
Do you have any recommendations for newsletters or people to follow that you think are very, very useful for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly share a list of some of the top ones that I look at, but I definitely follow Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton, at University of Pennsylvania. I follow some of the folks that are on that are part of my podcast network, actually. Mark Pfeffer and George LaRock, and some of those guys are really staying on top of the market, not necessarily just the technology and the use cases themselves, but really the market more generally, anticipating market movements and mergers and acquisitions, market consolidation. And then there's, I pay attention a lot to what's going on with like AI agents and agentic workflows, which we can talk a little bit about. But there's a futurist who I know, who actually leads one of the communities that I mentioned before, called Ross. His name's Ross Dawson, based in Australia, but he travels the world, and he's this futurist I've been following on and off since my IBM days, and he's producing a lot of really valuable content as it relates to how to think about the frameworks around agents. He talks about human in the loop versus AI in the loop, right? Human in the loop implies that we're not thinking about it from a human-centric kind of lens. It almost sounds like let the AI do its thing and we'll just provide, some oversight. But if you're really thinking about things in a human-centric way, then the AI is sort of augmenting us. And just, I don't know, it's very thought-provoking to me to think about some of these concepts and the implications for talent. And talent, I use talent in the most broad sense. I mean, it's not just current, full-time employees, it's gig workers, it's contractors, and it's students who are trying to plot their path through university studies and internships and things like that. Like what jobs will be in demand in the future? I know World Economic Forum just published their latest report for 2025 about the future of jobs and the future of in-demand skills and things like that. And so we continue to see a lot of focus on not technical skills at all. It's really these human skills that are more durable. We used to call them soft skills, but I don't really like that term at all. These are the power skills. These are the innate human skills that are going to make us marketable, to provide value to organizations, because it'll be a long time before, in most organizations, AI is doing everything. I mean, there's speculation about when that would actually be possible, but there's always going to be humans providing context and empathy and collaboration and innovation and all of these things. And so top skills that the World Economic Forum talks about are like analytical thinking, critical thinking, empathy, and just the way that our brains work and connecting dots and things like that. I mean, there are certain aspects of the human brain that are just irreplaceable. So it's just more sort of resources that I think about as I try to put it into context, and I try to make some of these things relatable to the average person who just doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to keep up with all of this. And yet I don't want them to necessarily be blindsided when all of a sudden your organization says, we've built some technology that can do 50% of your job, and so we need to find, either they take the stance that we're going to reskill and upskill people and find other things for them to do, or they really need to think about what else they might consider doing. What transferable skills have they attained such that they can go and switch gears and do something else with the next phase of their career. So these are important things for everyone to think about, and even the jobs that we thought were safe, when we talked about this wave of automation that came 10, 15 years ago. This isn't just about like administrative work and rote tasks. This is about knowledge work, right?
Exactly,
So that threatens a lot of people who we assumed were safe because they had this tacit knowledge, industry knowledge and things like that. And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. So everyone needs to sort of be on alert.
Indeed,
and think,
indeed.
Yeah.
And Bob, I would love to talk about this a bit later. I was just wondering, so you mentioned several transformations that already happened. How do those phases of transformation compare to the AI revolution we are experiencing today?
That's a fantastic question. And I guess the way that I think about it is, a lot of the prior transformations that at least I was a part of at IBM and then NBC Universal, it was generally not affecting everyone necessarily. I mean, there were aspects of some of those transformations that did ripple across organizations. So I think about the advent of digital transformation is a common phrase, and it was really about, okay, how do we get everyone onto the internet,
use a computer,
digitize things that were previously done through paper and files and things like that, and how do we digitize some of that information so that it is accessible and searchable and discoverable from other parts of the organization. And then the advent of social media was probably another one that affected everyone to varying degrees. But again, if you were more blue collar worker, you were sort of, I guess, deskless is a term that some people would say. If you were a deskless worker, some of those things didn't necessarily affect you. Your job, you worked with your hands, or in a physical environments or whatever, and it wasn't necessarily you weren't tied to your desk and hands to keyboard kind of thing. But a lot of the transformations that I did were restricted to a particular line of business, or it was focused on a particular domain. So you might have had workforce transformation or process transformation or customer service transformation and things like that. And I think what's different about this one is it's indiscriminate in terms of how it's affecting everyone, no matter whether you're blue collar, white collar, knowledge worker, deskless worker. It's affecting everyone, and to varying degrees, and it's hitting these roles and these industries at different speeds, depending on the rate of adoption and investment in some of these use cases. But I still think that there hasn't really been anything that's been this widespread and happening this quickly. So the speed is part of what makes this different. And organizations are generally not waiting until this technology has fully matured, or even, even waiting for it to have sort of guardrails around it, right? People, adoption is through the roof, um, even without some of the legislative and regulatory, guardrails around it, even without necessarily proof of, ROI that you might hope for or expect. It's people trying to not lose competitive advantage, people trying to not fall too far behind. People are using AI within organizations, oftentimes even before there's been the official AI use policies established, let alone, training provided to that would help you adhere to those policies. So we've just, in some ways, we've gotten ahead of ourselves because of all the hype and the speed, but it is moving incredibly fast, and people are, I guess, anxious to at least experiment and see what happens. And so I think there's a couple of things. It's part of it is it affects everyone regardless of, where you sit within the organization. That's up and down, left and right. And it's the speed at which this is happening. Every process, all the data implications layered on top of things we were already concerned about in terms of data privacy, in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of fairness and equity, things like that. So it's everything all at once in this case.
Indeed, and I must say that I find so remarkable about the advent of AI, that, well, previously change was very often limited to certain areas, and when the impact kicked in, it did take some time. However, nobody knows when you look at your emails what will be in a newsletter, because one of the LLM providers just released something amazing, and therefore that has potential to change everything people have worked on over the last few years or over the last few months, since what happened a few months ago was kind of unimaginable 3-4 years ago. So I think that kind of velocity is kind of unknown to humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, there's no sort of analog for it in a sense, right?
Perhaps the steam engine could, for example, the steam engine be like something that had like the not the same impact, but a similar impact. However, what happened with regards to the steam engine over 50 years now happens within a year.
Yeah, I don't know about the speed.
I don't know too much about steam engines, to be fair, but
right.
but I think the impact was quite massive, right? So people could now could suddenly travel a few hundred kilometers a day easily, or you could pump water from hundreds of meters below ground. It wasn't possible before, but it's still a different game.
Yeah, I mean, usually I reference, like we were talking about earlier, usually I reference the advent of the internet and social media right after it, just because when I think about what the organization needs to do and the policies that it needs to set and the opportunities it needs to try to explore, and the risks that it needs to try to mitigate, I see those as the best analogs and what most people can refer to. I mean, even as we think about the generations in the workforce now, I mean, everybody younger than me is almost like a digital native, right? So you've always had these kinds of technologies, and so I think the younger generations, of which there's at least 2.5 generations in the workforce, who have always had digital devices. They've always had access to the internet. They've always had a mobile phone in their pocket, and they don't necessarily have anything prior to that as a good sort of point of reference. But I mean, for those listening that are of younger generations or earlier in their career, it's you can't. It's hard to like put into. It's hard to relate to like what it was like. I mean, when I started at IBM, there was no internet. I did not have a mobile phone. I was just getting online, and I started. It was only a few months after I started in the mid '90s that I did go out and buy my first, mobile phone. But I mean, it was kind of a joke, right? Like, I mean, it was this, little, flip phone. It had an antenna that you actually had to pull up, and like, not everyone I knew actually had one, so it's not you couldn't just communicate with everyone. So it was a big change, and companies had to understand. We talk about like the consumerization of IT sometimes, or at least we used to talk about that, where consumer technology was ahead of what we would use inside the company. And so, but once the internet came about and social media came about, organizations, the natural reaction was to say, no, we have work to do. Like that's for business to consumer. No one's ever going to conduct commerce through the internet. Why would you post personal information online? Why would you do all these things? And it was like it took a while for people to understand the B2B potential. I remember demoing some social media analytics technologies when I was at IBM to a lot of companies, and they did not understand why they would ever need to listen to comments online. They just thought it was like this niche, thing. This is like what we say here in the US, like the peanut gallery. Like it's just like these random, people who don't have influence or whatever. And then, as it evolved, people saw, wow, this is actually really influential. We have a whole new wave of influential, voices and people, and people are paying attention. And so now you start thinking about reputational risk and brand awareness, and all of these things. And one damaging, tweet could, take down or cause, chaos within, PR firms and communications teams within an organization. So I just think, so where I was going was like you had to set policies that say this is how we are going to we're going to give you access. We're going to treat you like adults and trust you to use this, but you have to use it responsibly. And we'll be monitoring, anonymously, but we'll be monitoring to make sure people aren't accessing sites that they're not supposed to access, and using, these technologies appropriately. And in the same way with AI today, there's AI in every application, it seems, these days, whether it's a mobile app or a website or technology that's already deployed at a company that has added AI capabilities, or there's all these net new solutions and entire catalogs of custom GPTs and people creating things on Amazon, Party Rock, and Gemini. I mean, anybody that goes to do an internet search could just immediately switch their search engine to Perplexity or ChatGPT, et cetera. So it's at everyone's fingertips, and whether you sanction it or not, people have their personal devices and they're accessing these tools. And so how do you know that they're using it appropriately, that they're not putting your company at risk, that they're not creating backdoor ways of getting into your organization? How do you know that they're not uploading proprietary information to try to solve a customer challenge, or to get insights of how to respond appropriately and effectively to your boss before performance management review? Or like there's all kinds of ways that information could get exposed or people use these tools inappropriately, or use tools that are known to have to feed data back to the main mothership, as it were, to feed their models and train their models. And so we've seen examples of where that has happened. So you can't just stick your head in the sand. You've got to set some policies and some guardrails around how people are using this. And where I play and spend a lot of time in the talent space, this is really important, because you don't want to expose candidate information that they've trusted to give to you, and you want to treat people fairly and make sure that the AI you're using is not perpetuating bias. I mean, there's all kinds of things to think about.
Well, you mentioned before that AI that AI is associated in general with lots of fears. However, on the other hand, lots of hopes. So can you give us a bit of some insights how you, in working with your clients, address those concerns people have, or perhaps also to mitigate people expecting too much from a transformation towards an AI focused organization?
Yeah, I think in some ways this mirrors other technology that you're bringing to bear to solve a client challenge, right? I think some of the steps that you would take follows similar patterns. You need to lead with this discovery process and understanding what is the actual client challenge that we're trying to solve, as opposed to leading with technology. Here's my shiny new hammer, where are your nails, right? And so you've got to take that sort of pragmatic approach that says, we're not just going to deploy technology for technology's sake, like we were talking about earlier, like just, oh, everyone's doing it, like let's just this peer pressure, right? Like everyone else is using it, so like I guess we have to use it too. It's like, okay, well, where are you having the most difficulty? Where are your employees not able to handle certain client situations? Where are they inefficient? Where are they where's the most human error? Where are the most bottlenecks in a process or workflow? Where are we not able to see or aggregate data from disparate sources or across lines of business that might help us make better decisions? And so you've got to really think deeply about the problem. And so I think if you start with the challenge and then you get into however you approach this, but again, you could probably use a lot of pre-existing methodologies. So going through and identifying pain points, going through maybe some design thinking exercises and experience journeys and things like that would help you understand, well, let's make sure the AI is not exacerbating some of these existing problems, that it's not injecting new risk into a process by sharing that data that wasn't shared before, or like I said before, like perpetuating bias, or is the AI have some guardrails around it in terms of the fairness and inclusion or whatever, or their indicators of bias. And you've got to constantly sort of test these models to make sure that you're not passing some of that risk downstream, because as we start to link some of these AI agents or co-pilots or whatever, as they start talking to each other, you're basically just in almost, if you think about it, like a virus, right? Like you're just sort of infecting everything downstream with problems that you should have caught earlier. And that's why I mentioned at the beginning, like I talk to people about being responsible by design. So responsible AI or human-centric AI isn't just about how you use it, it's how you designed it from the beginning. Where did the data come from? What's the data sort of provenance? Did you get it from a trusted source? Is it high quality data? Did you check the data for bias or adverse impact before you even put it into that, algorithm, so that you've got more trusted data and output from that algorithm as you go and use that and rely on that to make decisions. So anytime you have AI that's part of a decision-making process, you really need to understand, are there ways in which this could be skewed? So you've got to do all kinds of testing. I think my understanding is a little bit different than like typical like software testing, where you go through, functional testing and user testing and all these different phases of testing cycles. But you do have to do things similar, what they often call evals or evaluations. So every time you add new functionality to some type of AI, whether it's a co-pilot or GPT or an agent or whatever, you've got to check it to see that it's not giving you output that you didn't expect, or that you're not comfortable with, or whatever. So I just think you need to be really thorough with testing this, and you almost have to continuously monitor, some of this stuff. And so this is particularly true again in talent, because the EU. I mean, Ben, this because you're in the EU. I mean, the EU would say anything related to talent and HR is a high risk use case, right? Because it impacts or could impact someone's livelihood. It could impact how much they're paid, their career potential, their learning and development opportunities, not to mention on the talent acquisition side, their ability to move forward through the hiring process, right? So all these things are potentially high risk, and therefore are going to necessitate like a higher level of scrutiny and literacy. When we talk about the average recruiter, for example, needs to understand how much they can trust the output of an algorithm that says, here are your top 25 candidates. Well, are you sure? Like, how do I know that you did this, mitigating as much bias as possible and minimizing the adverse impact? How do I know that you were looking at people's true skills and potential to succeed in this role, and not just that the candidate used AI to make sure that every single keyword in the job description was added to their resume and inflated the match score, and you use that to decide who gets an interview or not. I mean, we've got to. I don't want to go too far into the talent space, but I mean, these are very real concerns that people have for good reason, because these kinds of things are happening today, and that's why when we talk about human in the loop, there always needs to be human oversight. And even rules in other places outside the EU, you've got to understand how much weight did the algorithm carry in the decision-making process, because we still want humans to have the ultimate say in who moves forward and the decisions that are made as a result of the insights that the algorithm gives you.
Indeed, and what I find incredibly interesting is to see, how does the human interaction with AI work, and how this also helps to address concerns. So you mentioned before that, you very often in transformation projects talk about, may AI replace me? And as soon as people realize how potent AI is, there is indeed the question of whether this will have an incredibly significant impact on my work, on my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think it depends on how companies are approaching it and the type of AI that you're using and deploying. So are you giving it to employees so that they have this sort of they have it like a second brain, next to them, like, and that could be, so people use that term usually related to the individual itself, right? Like, so all the information that you've seen, the communications within your email and your messaging systems and your platforms, you can't possibly remember it all. You've got documents in there or whatever, and so that second brain is really like this. It's like literally augmenting your own brain and its limitations, just in terms of how much information you can store and remember dynamically, right? So there's that kind of implementation, and then there's a co-pilot that may aggregate the collective knowledge and the collective intelligence of your team or even your organization, that says, I'm gonna there are things that I don't know, but having this sort of knowledgeable co-pilot or agent can basically gather on my behalf. So customer service is a good example. You've got a new customer service agent. They don't have a lot of experience to go on, and yet they have this co-pilot that basically gives them team leader tenured employee level knowledge at their fingertips in the middle of a conversation with a customer, right? So we used to have systems that had to be designed really painfully to create these like expert knowledge systems, and it goes into these like tree graphs that are incredibly complicated, all kinds of rules-based things. And now you don't have that. Now you have these dynamic systems that have some form of reasoning and logic and powers of sort of deduction based on how it's been trained, and what decisions were made based on this in the past or whatever. And so it's at least at the level of an intern in some cases, but it could also be that expert level knowledge that is brought to bear in the moment of need, for certain less tenured and less knowledgeable workers. So there's a lot of different sort of use cases that you may have for these different types of AI, but the key is to try to make it such that it is augmenting human ability and human knowledge. But to your point, sometimes there's situations where people are they see what it's capable of, and then they see that it can not only maybe automate. There might be some things where it's just an advanced form of automation, and it's doing these all these tasks that humans used to do, but it's also taking on these higher order tasks where we were talking about before, like it can do sort of market research analyst or consultant level tasks, because everyone has some portion of their day that's spent doing somewhat routine tasks and things that could be sort of codified into some piece of technology. It's just that technology is now more advanced than it was before. But you've got to think about not just that this is going to augment your work, but invariably, when you think about the population of people in a particular role at a company, if you start when automation and AI start to take on double-digit percentages of those roles, then organizations have to try to anticipate some of that and try to anticipate the trajectory of some of that, which I know is hard because things are moving so fast. But you've got to start to lay out some roadmaps in a sort of workforce planning kind of exercise that say, this technology is moving such that I'm going to need the equivalent of maybe 5 fewer people every 3 months. Well, what does that mean? That means at the end of the year, I've got the equivalent of 20 people's workload that can be handled through technology. And technology isn't free. I mean, you've got to figure out the costs there. You've got to figure out the impact to experiences of people interacting now potentially with AI and conversational, AI instead of humans. Some people may not like that, but over time, I think they'll get used to it. So you've got to start to map those things out and say, okay, what am I doing with that 20, with those 20, the equivalent of 20, full-time people? What am I doing with them? I've got to look at who are the candidates to be sort of reskilled and move on to other areas of growth within the organization where maybe AI hasn't hit yet because we're investing in AI use cases elsewhere. So can we move these people to other things? Can they move up the hierarchy and move into leadership positions? Are there other things that they can do, or do we need to make some tough decisions and have to sort of downsize because that's what our stakeholders, in some cases shareholders, demand? So these aren't necessarily easy decisions to make, but ideally we recognize that employees have a lot of transferable skills, and they can do a lot more than their current job description says that they're doing. And so that's where I really want people to think about what else could we do with these resources that we have, because maybe they really like working with you, they're loyal, they've been there for years or whatever. And so how do we make sure there's sort of mutual benefit, and how do they help you sort of make a pivot to do something else, knowing that it's just a part of it's just an economic financial decision. And so what do we do with that? But these definitely aren't easy decisions. I mean, I generally tell people, if you like your job and the work that you do, make sure you learn enough about AI that you know how it's going to impact and make you hopefully more effective. But you definitely want to move yourself sort of up the sort of value chain, and also make sure that you're one of the folks who is comfortable with AI, because that will keep you ahead of the curve and above this red line that says, okay, if we need to cut 25% of the people or whatever, that you keep yourself above that line, because you're adaptable, you're curious, and you're willing to continuously learn new skills. But if you're stubborn, right, and say AI could never do what I do, or the organization they love me, they would never do this to me, or whatever, like, I just don't want people to be too dug in and too naive about the speed at which things are changing. And you've just got to control your own destiny in a way.
Indeed, and therefore I would love to focus a bit on the areas of growth you mentioned, so that in particular HR organizations then refocus themselves on, what are the areas where I can actually grow, instead of being a scared individual just waiting for cuts to be made. So I think that's not a very attractive prospect, probably, but focusing on the growth areas, that's the interesting part, right? To get some positivity in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, curiosity can go a long way, right? Curiosity and adaptability. Start asking, what else you could be doing. Pay attention to what your organization is doing in terms of their technology strategy, because hopefully people in HR know this, but your job in general is to make sure you've got the right talent strategy in place to execute against your business strategy and your technology strategy. So if you understand how those three pillars are working in concert, then you can try to sort of anticipate things. So if you see your company is making big investments in AI and automation, and that your HR leadership is part of those conversations, and they're involved or whatever, You just need to pay attention to where they might be making, some of those investments. So, and also where you're starting with some of the routine work that you might be doing. So I always think of like recruitment coordinators, right? That spend oftentimes at least half their time just scheduling interviews with candidates. There's technology has been around for years that can basically do that. I mean, we've all been using, Calendly and Good Time and, all of these things to schedule appointments with each other, schedule interviews or whatever. And you can do that through just, click dates, times, whatever. This aligns to my schedule, boom, done, or whatever. I mean, these are some of the more routine. It's actually quite complex from a technological standpoint, but there are dozens of these solutions that exist. So what else could this recruiting coordinator be doing? Could they spend more time building relationships with candidates and prospects? Could they, take on more recruiting operations tasks, looking at data and deriving insights from that? Can they help with onboarding? There's all kinds of other things that these folks could potentially do. And if you don't take that initiative, then unfortunately they may just make those cuts, right? And so, I mean, that's just one example, but I think a lot of people in talent acquisition, I mean, they have this goal to elevate their capabilities and become more talent advisors, to the organization, spend more time with the hiring manager, making sure that they're really clear on, what their needs are and what the market rates are for these types of roles, and what else could they be doing. So everyone needs to start to think about what that means. I mean, people say that. People have been saying that since I pivoted into this space, 4 years ago. Well, we're not just recruiters, we're talent advisors. Well, explain to me exactly what that means, and explain it to me in the context of AI. When you have all these AI capabilities, I mean, I can go into countless tools right now and do, some level of market research, or I can go and, pull in some labor market intelligence and some other, talent intelligence data about the trajectory of different roles and different comps in different countries. There's all kinds of things that can be brought to bear when people are making these decisions, all the way back to when the rec was approved by finance. I mean, even that may say, I know you just approved this rec, but I think maybe we need to change exactly how we're framing this role, and maybe we need to think about what the trajectory of this role is, because originally we thought we needed a full-time person, but at the rate and pace that things are moving, maybe this role is only needed for like 12 months. Maybe we just get a contractor for a year, and we don't need a full-time employee, and that changes the accounting, and that changes all kinds of things. So I just think people need to just have their ears and eyes open to what's going on around them, to try to anticipate that, and then have conversations with your manager and your leadership team to make sure that you fully understand some of these moves that are being made, so that you are not caught flat-footed when tough decisions have to be made. So yeah.
Well, I personally also I love this side of the AI revolution, that we can focus on the things that are, they were very good at, right? And the things that actually are fun, right? And rather than those things that are boring, that kind of also limit your own imagination, rather than focus on something that lifts you up, that lifts the entire organization up. And it's an amazing time to be alive, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, right? And I think there's we've got these sort of epidemics of burnout and things like that, and HR knows that very well, not just for all the phone calls they get, but themselves. I mean, just it has not been easy. I empathize with with HR folks in all different disciplines about how difficult the last few years have been, probably at least since COVID, and so so it's not easy, but I think you've just got to do what you can to sort of control what you can control and try to anticipate what you can't, and that puts you in a better position to be ready when someone throws a curveball and you need to pivot and adjust. I think you'll be more marketable. I think even now we're going to start to see job descriptions that are looking for people that have some AI exposure, just like when I was looking for a job way back in the 1900s. It's people were asking like about your word processing skills. How many words a minute can you type, right? Like, do you know? I don't remember if Microsoft Office was available then, but you know what I mean. Like, instead of are you proficient with PowerPoint and Excel and Word, and can you do this, that, and the other? Like, are you proficient? How's your AI literacy? Are you proficient with using tools so that they know you're coming in to a new role with curiosity, with this sort of learning mindset, and that you know how to make yourself as efficient as you can by leveraging trusted AI tools to augment your own capability.
Awesome. Bob, thank you so much. It was a great fun talking to you. I really like the positivity, and I can only reiterate, I think it's an amazing time to be alive, and I'm very much looking forward to what's going to happen in the near future.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the discussion. I am optimistic that 2025 is going to be an incredible year, and I just encourage everyone to just stay on top as best you can. I'll send you some links of some resources, for your audience, but just try not to be overwhelmed. Just focus on the things that are, where AI is affecting, your life and your role, your industry, your company. Try not to get overwhelmed by all the jargon and buzzwords, and because it's moving too fast. I promise, no one is keeping up with all of it effectively. So just, take a deep breath, but find some areas where it's most relevant to you, and innovate responsibly, as I like to say.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Bob, and thanks guys for listening in, and see you next time.